Right, well, I think we are now live. I know that our friends in Stoke have joined in. Right, we will start in a moment or so. I'm just going to give a chance for other people to join in. There's been a slight technical hitch, for which I apologise, but we'll start any moment. Just going to double check. Right, okay. Okay, I'm going to start. We're going to start the webinar, and if anybody else joins in, they will join in. I'm going to go straight to the PowerPoint presentations, okay, and go through this. Right, today's webinar is about the European structural funds and how they are working in England in particular. Okay, so we've done all the interact buttons. You don't need to know about that, particularly if there's only one person listening to me at the moment. Mission statement, right, I've just put the Europe 2020 mission statement in, as obviously the European structural funds relate very strongly to Europe 2020. So all these themes run through the structural funds in one way or another. I'll explain how we get to the criteria for the spending of the structural funds within the individual regions of England in a moment, but somewhere in the documents there will be reference to these themes of the Europe 2020 agenda, as will be explained. The structural funds are the first group there. These are the funds that are geographically focused, that do not require partners in other countries. So this is simply to try and access funding that might be relevant within your particular region. I'm not going to talk about the Interreg program in this webinar. That is a separate allocation of the structural funds that does require partners, so that's completely separate. I'm only talking about the structural funds that are spent within the individual countries. You'll see the structural funds take the majority of the European Union funding, 73%, so obviously they are rather important. Structural funds. There are 5 structural funds, and then ways in which these funds are spent, depending on either a category of economic status for your particular part of Europe, or via the Interreg program, which, as I said, involves partnerships. Now, we're focusing today on the first mechanism, which is the one based on categories of economic status. The overall goal of the structural funds is to reduce regional disparities in terms of income, wealth, and opportunities. So in other words, to raise the standard of living and prosperity across Europe, to do that through all sorts of means in order to sort of create jobs, growth, develop skills, capacity within the workforce, and so on and so forth. These are the funds. You can forget the Cohesion Fund. This doesn't apply in the UK. ERDF and ESF are funds that I'm sure everybody will have heard of. Then there's also the Agricultural Fund and the Maritime and Fisheries Fund. Maritime and Fisheries Fund is not relevant to most parts of the UK, but I will talk about ERDF and ESF, and I will briefly also mention some issues about the Agricultural Fund as well. If you go back to the documentation that's been produced by the European Commission over the years, you will see that they have given examples in the past of ways in which ERDF and ESF can be used to fund arts, culture, heritage, creative industries, and so on. There's absolutely no reason why these funds cannot be spent in these particular areas, but the key issue is the degree to which arts, culture, heritage, or creative industries-based projects will deliver the overall goals and objectives, and we'll come to that in a moment. Who will get what from 2014? This is the map of Europe. You'll see the dark red bits are the areas where, which are the most, or the worst off, the least well off, I think is the way in which they now phrase it. You'll see mostly Central Eastern Europe, bits of Greece, southern Italy, bit of Spain, most of Portugal, and then there's two shining red bits on the edges of the United Kingdom. If you want more information about any of this from the European Commission point of view, there's a whole raft of websites there. DG Regio is the Directorate General for Regional Policy, which looks after ERDF. DG Employment Social Affairs looks after ESF. And the EAC, which is the Education, Audiovisual and Culture Directorate General, also has some case studies on projects funded through these programs. For Connexus members, you can download listings of project examples as well from the Connexus website. This is a typical example here of an ERDF project, which was conversion of an old building, or the old Waterford Crystal Factory, to be a visitor and tourist centre and a visitor attraction, on the basis that lots of people would come to Waterford, or more people would come to Waterford because of this wonderful attraction. They'd spend money on the local economy through hotels and restaurants and goodness knows what, and everything would grow in terms of prosperity all around. That's a very typical example. This is a slightly less typical example, but just making the point that ERDF money does not have to be spent just on buildings. This was over €1 million for a digital games development project in association with Abate University. So, you know, it is more broadly based than just building-based developments. Typical ESF projects are these sorts of projects. This is a training project where lots of ESF money was provided to help NEETs, people who are not in employment, education, or training, to find work in the creative industries by giving them additional skills and so on, encouraging their creativity. That's one example of a project. Here is another example, DV8, which is a training provider based in Brighton, which did much the same. So ways in which creativity, arts, culture, skills can be used to help people become better chance of being employed, or to get a better job, whatever it might be. Okay, so in the UK, the way in which we're not looking at the bottom row there, you can ignore the one about Interreg, but the three yellow rows, these are the categories of region. So in the UK, if you are in Cornwall or West Wales, you get the largest per capita spend because you are in the less developed regions. Transition regions get the second highest per capita spend, and those are those particular areas there. It does, of course, include places like Merseyside, Shropshire, Staffordshire, which, as far as I know, if my geography serves me correctly, does include Stoke. So that's a good thing. So you're in a transition region. More developed regions is the rest of the UK, and that gets the smallest amount per capita, but it does get some. So every part of the UK does get some money via the structural funds. The way in which this money is allocated, just in summary, in England is via the LEPs, the local enterprise partnerships. I'll say more about that in a second. Okay, a structure is complicated. In a way, you will find that at the end of the day, it's a bit more straightforward, but let's just begin with the complicated bit. But before we do, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back and double check to make sure that everybody is still with me and that we haven't had a lot of questions from people saying anything at all. Nope, no questions at all. So we shall keep going. I'll go back to the slides. Sorry about this. Okay. You'll see at the EU level, there is the EU legislative package. So the EU, sets out legislation which allocates funds and the overall criteria for ERDF, ESF, Cohesion Fund, Agriculture and Fisheries. Then at the national level, there is a partnership agreement. And then below the national level, or it may, if it's a small member state, it will also be at the national level. But for other larger member states, such as the UK, it will be at the regional level. There will be various operational programs for each of the individual funds. So ERDF, ESF, Rural, Fisheries, Cohesion Fund. And there may also be multi-fund operational programs. So it's possible for some countries, if they so choose, to put together a multi-fund operational program. The operational program sets out the criteria for the spending of the structural funds in that country or region, right? So the operational program will take the European criteria and also the national or regional criteria, depending on which level it is operating, and merge them together to come up with some sort of operational program. Okay, so that's what operational program means. The way it works in England is that they have got a multi-fund program. You'll see at the top there's the single EU growth program, which is about 6 billion euros, which is ERDF, ESF, and bits of agriculture. There is a separate rural development program, and there's also a separate maritime and fisheries program. And you'll see that in red, the key box is the LEPs, who will steer the funding. Now, that wording is quite important. The LEPs do not spend money. They are not legally allowed to actually spend money, contract people, give money away, that sort of thing. But they do guide the allocation of the funding. I'll explain this more as we go through. So at the bottom there, you'll see the project proposals. These go to the LEPs. The LEPs steer the funding. There are local government teams to assist and advise how the actual program is then going to be spent. Okay, so it's centralized, but with the input of these various local enterprise partnerships. Okay, so here we go. Devolution, EU to the UK, to the English region, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. There are some websites there that you might find useful. One for ERDF, one for ESF, one for agriculture. RDPE is the Rural Development Programme for England. And one for the European Funding Network, which is a general resource that helps people understand European funding and is quite useful. Okay. So funds are devolved from the EU to 28 member states. In the UK, the first point of contact is BIS, the Department for Business, Innovation and Science, though the actual funds will go through DCLG, the Department for Communities and Local Government, which is organising the managing agency. The managing agency is the centralised body that will organise and administer these funds. Sometimes it's called the managing authority. I'm not sure whether they're actually changing their name, but managing agency, managing authority, they're the same thing as far as you need to know. So different government departments are responsible for different funds, just to make life complicated. DCLG for ERDF, DWP for ESF, and DEFRA for agriculture and fisheries. And then, of course, separately, the governments of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are also in on the act for the funds that are going to their particular nations or Northern Ireland. Intermediary bodies. Now, what happens is that they then decide that if it's a very big nation or region or country, they will introduce intermediary bodies, in other words, organizations that are, in theory, closer to the potential recipients. Now, in England, that used to be the 9 RDAs, Regional Development Associations. They were scrapped by the current government, and we now have 39 LEPs. I sometimes wonder if they deliberately chose 39 LEPs because there's an amusing little play on words in there, but perhaps not. Local enterprise partnerships. In Scotland, the Scottish government, I have to say, very unclear as to exactly how it's working in Scotland. Wales, the intermediary associate body, is WEFO, the Welsh European Funding Organisation, which actually serves the whole nation of Wales. So that's it's not, it's just one intermediary body. In Northern Ireland, there are various government departments that get involved. Yes, strategic SEUPB is the Special European Programs Body or something like that. Anyway, various agencies. Don't need to worry about Northern Ireland. About the LEPs. The LEPs were set up in 2011 via BIS, set up on a volunteer basis without public funding. They were a bit of a disaster. There has now been some money given to them to help them operate, but they are very, very, very limited resources. They are very, they're not overfunded. I mean, the RDAs were accused of being overfunded. The LEPs certainly aren't. They come in different sizes and structures. There's no one model. LEPs can be set up to meet their own regional needs. Some of them have special interest groups, advisory panels. Their boards differ. There is a network. If you want to track down your LEP, visit the LEP network, lepnetwork.net. You'll find all the contact details for your LEP. The responsibilities of the LEPs are to allocate the local growth fund, draw up plans for local growth, and then to get involved in the management of the EU structural investment funds, the ESIF. So they set the strategy for the ESIF program within their particular areas, and then they appoint members of the ESIF committee, and the ESIF committee for the LEP will oversee delivery of the strategy, development of a pipeline of proposals, consider decisions, and monitor performance against targets. So there'll be an ESIF strategy for each of the LEPs. Now, you'll remember at the very beginning, I talked about the operational programs. So there is an operational program for each of the funds for England. And alongside the operational program, which merges the UK government's priorities with the European priorities, there are the ESIF strategies. And the ESIF strategies are prepared by each LEP, and they merge the economic strategy for that LEP with the European strategy as well to come up with a set of priorities and guidelines. The next point about overseeing development of an appropriate pipeline of proposals. What that means is that you do not apply to the LEP for your project, but you should work with the LEP because their job is to help develop projects that can then apply for funds to the centralized managing agency. So the applications are made centrally, and the LEP's job is to foster successful projects that will apply to the managing agency. The next point you'll see is consider decisions on the investment of the funds. And what this is saying is that the LEPs have a role in advising the central agency on which projects should receive funding in their particular location. So in their LEP area, which projects should receive funding. And then obviously, finally, the job is to monitor performance against particular targets. Okay, so the government has prepared operational programs, the operational program for ERDF, ESF, and agriculture. And then there's the managing agency. The managing agency has responsibility for overseeing the selection process, issuing contracts, spending the funds, and monitoring successful projects. Okay. The managing agency will set up growth delivery teams, which were the Her Majesty's government teams in the diagram that I showed you earlier. There will be about 9 Her Majesty's government teams or growth delivery teams covering similar areas to those of the RDAs. Although we don't have no RDAs, we have growth delivery teams covering RDA-related areas. The role of these teams is to stimulate and assist regional and local sectors and organisations to develop potentially successful applications, which in one way is also the role of the LEP. So there is some overlap between the role of the growth delivery teams and the role of the LEP. Anyway, there you go. Then at the local level, the key agencies are the LEPs, and the LEPs have been allocated a notional amount of structural funds which should be spent in their areas. So when the applications are made, they are made centrally, but in the context of the fact that there is a notional allocation. So decisions will be made about spending money in a particular area up to the limit that has been set for that particular area. And they won't make allocations beyond that. The LEPs have been asked to prepare their ESIF, European Structural Investment Fund Strategy, which, as I said, is a blend of the EC guidance notes and the regional economic strategy for their area. Now, depending on the nature of the LEP and its geographical location, there may be more than one regional economic strategy which is considered in the development of the ESIF. The ESIF sets out objectives, priorities, criteria, and measures, and the LEPs are also responsible for their own local implementation plans, which sets out how they will achieve the objectives and goals in their ESIF. So the ESIF is the plan, and then there'll be an implementation plan which sets out how they're going to actually achieve what they've said they're going to do in the ESIF. Simple, straightforward, and clear. I'm sure you will all agree. Right, allocations to the LEPs. These are the allocations to the less developed regions and the transition regions. Now, the only less developed region in England, I'm only talking about England here, obviously, because we're talking about LEPs. The only least developed region here is Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and the other regions there are the transition regions, or at least some of them are transition regions. Some part of it is transition region. And you'll see that Stoke, I know there's somebody listening from Stoke, they have 161 million euros is their allocation. Other regions are allocated funds, and here is the long list. You will see, for example, that obviously, even though they're not the less developed regions, there are still big allocations. I mean, towards the bottom, you'll see Greater Manchester, 414 million euro. The biggest, of course, is London, 745 million euro. Leeds, 389 million euros, so quite a lot going to Leeds. Greater Birmingham and Solihull, 255 million. It's very interesting that the reason for that will become clear. Greater Birmingham and Solihull, 255 million. Greater Manchester, 413 million. Interesting. Okay. So, in summary, before we go on, I'm just going to go back and check again, just to make absolutely certain that everybody is still with me. Sorry, pressed the wrong button. Asked a couple of questions. Right. Are we better contacting BIS or the LEP in the first instance about a project proposal? LEP. If you contact anybody else, you will simply be referred back to the LEP. If your LEP, I'm not saying anything, I don't know anything about the Stoke and Staffordshire LEP, but if, for example, your particular LEP was unhelpful, I'm afraid you're stuck because the larger agencies, like BIS and the managing agency and so on, will simply refer you back to your LEP, because your LEP is the point of contact for anybody in the LEP region. How do you find out who are the local growth delivery team for the West Midlands? The LEP should be able to tell you. I'm sorry, I know this sounds terribly circular, but it is the LEP who are there to provide help and assistance. If you are having a problem about the local growth delivery team and you really want to sort of try and speak to them, then you could go to the managing agency, and there are some web links which either I've given you or I'll give you a bit in a moment, which will be able to help you find those particular details there. You say you know the LEP for Staffordshire. My only question is, how well do you know the LEP for Staffordshire? Do you know the LEP well enough to help you achieve what you are hoping to achieve? Okay. Managing agency received proposed, right. managing agency announces calls for proposals. You apply through the managing agency's single centralized website. Your applications must reflect both the operational program for the fund for which you are applying and the ESF produced by the LEP in which region you happen to be. The managing agency will receive and process all applications. We understand it's going to be a two-stage application process. First, you submit an outline. If that's successful, then you submit a full application. Managing agency, we are told, will organize juries to assess, and the LEPs, we understand, will have an advisory role in the selection process. Given that each LEP has its own ESIF and their own financial allocation, then presumably they have quite a substantial involvement in advising the managing agency on the applications which the managing agency will receive. And hopefully, the applications received by the managing agency from a particular LEP area will already have the fingerprints of that LEP all over it, because they should have been talking with the LEP to make sure their application was going to be appropriate and going to be welcomed. Successful projects will be contracted and managed directly by the managing agency. Okay. As well as that, there are technical assistance providers which have been appointed to provide guidance and support to particular sectors in respect of particular funds. Now, there aren't any technical assistance for arts, culture, heritage, creative industries specifically, but the one we have found is NCVO, the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. They are the TA for the European Social Fund for the voluntary sector. So if you are a non-profit organisation, charitable, all the rest of it, in the arts and culture, then you could certainly take advantage of the services that NCVO have to offer. But of course, they are focused on the broad voluntary sector, so they may not necessarily be able to answer specific and detailed questions. But it doesn't seem to us that there are any other TA providers to help in this particular area for arts, culture, heritage, or creative industries, sadly. There's also a program monitoring committee, which is set up by the managing agency, provide a secretariat. That's their job, is to oversee the programs. There are apparently 39 local subcommittees, one for each LEP area. It is extraordinary, isn't it? There is not only a LEP, but there are the growth teams, and now there is a project monitoring committee and 39 local subcommittees. Oh, God. Anyway. Local subcommittees will be chaired by local partners, whoever they may be, and supported by the managing authority. They report to the program monitoring committee. So there's lots of different structures involved that you might be useful for you to at least be aware of. The role of the local PMC is to publicise and promote the opportunities, develop a pipeline of operations, develop and agree the breadth, scope, and timing of calls, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to read all that out. Seems to me that there is huge overlap between the role of the local PMC and the role of the LEP. It would certainly seem to be advantageous to be involved with the local PMC if you possibly can. So, delivery for funds, competitions for project proposals, open and competitive tendering for contracts, and opt-in models, right? Most people will be interested in competitions for project proposals. That's the straightforward route. I'm not necessarily thinking that people will be that interested in the competitive tendering for delivering contracts because they're probably not relevant to the arts, culture, and heritage sectors, but the competition proposals certainly. Opt-in, right. Now, the opt-in model is something that works only for the ESF, so it's only relevant to ESF, and the opt-in model is a way in which it's designed to help people, because the idea is that they will arrange contractual arrangements, make contractual arrangements with certain key delivery bodies who will provide the match funding that is required. So instead of applying to the managing agency and having to sort of come up with the match funding, you would apply to one of the opt-in agencies who will have already supplied the match funding, and therefore you don't need to supply the match funding. Now, even that's not quite 100% correct, because actually there are two types of opt-in agencies. There are opt-in agencies where you do apply to them, And there are other opt-in agencies where they simply support your application to the managing agency. So they agree to provide the match funding, but you still have to apply to the managing agency. The opt-in agencies in England for the ESF include the Skills Development Agency, UKTI, and the Big Lottery Fund. More about the Big Lottery Fund to follow. Financial instruments. There are loans and guarantee funds which are also available through the or are potentially available through the ESIF. I'm not going to talk about those because they're fairly straightforward. They're designed to help people access additional funding for their activities. And there's also CLLD, Community-Led Local Development, which is based on a partnership of public-private civil society contributors. There are local action groups set up. This is up to the LEPs, so if you think this might be a possible way for you to access European funding, then of course this is something you need to discuss with your LEP. Presumably the LEP will be aware that there is the CLLD option. At least one LEP a little while ago didn't even know they existed. But anyway, maybe it's better in Stoke. ERDF, right. ERDF has in the past focused on infrastructure, but it is able to fund a broad range of projects which address the following: strengthening research, technology development and innovation, so research and development and innovation, ICT, competitiveness of small and medium enterprises, and the shift towards a low carbon economy. So those are some of the things that ERDF might fund. Climate change adaptation, preserving and protecting the environment, promoting sustainable transport, promoting social inclusion, combating poverty and discrimination, and so on. Okay, all ERDF applications have to find their own match funding, and they all have to go to the managing agency's portal. We expect that the first deadlines will be in May, and the calls should be out anytime. They may be out. I don't think they're out now. I think I would have noticed that, but they are due out any moment. Opt-in ESF. These are projects where match funding, as I've said, is provided by the partnership organization. So these will receive funding directly, and they will provide 100% of the funding, 30% from ESF and 70% from their own allocation. The agreed partner organizations for opt-in are DWP itself, so another government department, the Department of Work and Pensions, the Skills Funding Agency, NOMS, the National Offender Management Service, and the Big Lottery Fund. As far as I'm aware, there have been no timetables for applications for opt-in grants. Opt-out. So these are the ones which is like most of the applications, particularly for ERDF, where opt-in doesn't apply. These are applications which find their own match funding and they apply to the centralized portal. The calls for applications come out any day now, and the deadlines will be in May. CLLD, there's 20% of ESF to be spent on this particular area. Managing authority will initially invite outline expressions of interest from existing or new local action groups where agreed in the local ESIF strategy. So again, this is back to the LEPs. The LEPs may or may not have agreed to set up local action groups. Those local action groups will be the ones who will be invited to put in expressions of interest. So the key thing is to find out what's happening in your local LEP area to see whether there's any chance of the local action group there delivering a CLLD set of activities. Right, now before we go on to the recognition or not of arts and culture, I'll just check again to see whether there's any further questions. No more questions. Probably all fallen asleep by now. Okay, I do apologize, I've got a cold again today, so I'm sorry about that. Anyway, we decided to try and do some research as to how high a priority these various strategic documents and operational programs and everything else, what they had placed, the importance they had placed on arts and culture. We therefore downloaded all the operational programs and the 39 ESIF strategies, and we went through them all, simply trying to identify the number of times certain keywords appear. And these are the list of keywords we chose: art and arts, audiovisual, creative, culture, cultural, film, games, heritage, media, theatre, and visitor economy. You'll see we left out, obviously, words where they were in phrases that weren't relevant to the cultural sector. So what did we end up with? Well, in the ESIFs, the European strategies written by the LEPs, these strategies are on average 100 pages, so we calculated there are about 2 million words in all these documents. The total references to all the words on the previous slide is 1,462. The most common word is creative, not surprisingly, then culture or cultural, then visitor economy, and then heritage. There were very few references to film or games, even fewer to theatre, and none at all to audiovisual, interestingly. The highest number of references were in Greater Birmingham and Solihull, with 84, Tees Valley 82, West of England 77. The lowest number of references was Thames Valley, Berkshire, with just 5, York and North Yorkshire with 8, Greater Lincolnshire with 12, and Greater Manchester, sadly, with just 14, in spite of the fact that they have been getting a lot of kudos recently for all their commitment to arts and culture and the building of the new big theatre as part of George Osborne's promises to Devo Meg and all that sort of thing. Anyway, not very good for Manchester. In the operational programs, the results are completely dire. I can't think of any other word. In the operational program for ERDF, there were just 11 references, and there was only 1 in the ESF operational program. And some of those were stretching the definition of a relevant reference, so they were words, but they appeared in titles like Creative Europe, English Heritage, Department for Culture, Media and Sport. Exclude those, there were only 8. There were no references to art, arts, audiovisual, film, games, theatre, just 1 reference to heritage, media or visitor economy, 4 to creative, 5 to culture or cultural. The sole reference in the operational program for ESF was to culture. Absolutely nothing about the need for a creative workforce. Very, very, very depressing, I am afraid. Okay. Arts Council England, just to make a key point that Arts Council England has stated that it can help LEPs in the following ways. It has written to the various LEPs to explain that it wishes to help. It says that it can identify strategic opportunities, provide advice, broker relationships, align their investment. So they're very happy to sort of, shift their investment towards matching the priorities of the LEPs. However, given the fact that most LEPs don't even recognise arts and culture, they probably won't have to shift very far. They prepared a document which I think you can now download from the website, or if not, I can probably send it to you, or I can tell you who to contact at the Arts Council for that particular document. So they're trying to help the Arts Council, which is good. Likely timetable. So this is what we've heard. January, they're supposed to have agreed the ESF program. February, agreed ERDF. February goes live in London, and summer, the first funding agreements will be issued. That's what we heard will be the timetable. First course proposals: open competitive approach, must deliver against the ERDF operational program, the ESIF for a particular LEP, and the call for proposals document that will be published by the managing agency. England-wide process: apply online. First stage, outline application. If you're successful, go to the second stage, and no appeals. Very straightforward. Top tips for making your project application: why is there a need for this project? What evidence can you provide of the need? What statistical evidence can you provide? How does it relate to the ESIF in particular for the LEP area in which you are going to run this project? What is the project actually going to do? What does it offer to address the needs that you have identified? When and how will it be delivered? In what are the bright ideas you have for the delivery of this particular project? There are ESF community grants. Okay, there are small grants of up to 15,000 to small third sector organizations to support a range of activities helping individuals in the hardest to reach communities to help people make progress towards entering the labour force. These are funded by, or managed rather, by the Skills Funding Agency, except in London, where it's the London councils that administer these. And there are some grant coordinating bodies operating on a regional basis, but if you contact the Skills Funding Agency, the SFA, they will be able to tell you. how you might get hold of a community grant, if that might be relevant to you. And finally, on this whiz trip around structural funds, don't forget that there is the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. There is a greater focus on rural regeneration these days. They do talk about supporting cultural services, cultural and natural heritage, and so on and so forth. There is an ongoing leader program where projects will be funded via local action groups in rural communities. Some of the examples they talk about there are listed in that particular slide. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say at this particular point. There are some examples of leader projects in the past. Whether leader projects will be as friendly towards culture in the future is a little bit of a question, I have to say, because the rural funding priorities seem to be a bit tighter this time round, more focused on jobs and growth as per the Europe 2020 agenda. So there may be not quite as many opportunities for culture. But again, this will depend on what is in the ESIF for your particular LEP region, if your LEP region covers rural areas. Allocation of EAFRD, we did a conference on that in the end of January in Preston, and it didn't provide us with a great deal of additional information, I have to say, because they're still working on some of the detail of that, but we will be putting as more information out about that in due course. And that's it. So next steps, sign up for our Twitter feed. We will be putting out more information as soon as we hear more about the structural funds. Do make contact with your LEP. That's the only way in. It's the only game in town, I'm afraid. Do read the ESF. Make sure you have read all the appropriate areas of the ESF and match your project to what is in your LEP's ESIF. And obviously also read the relevant operational program for whichever fund you are thinking of going for, the ERDF or the ESF. And of course, there are the other committees that you may wish to sort of make contact with, or the advisory groups or Manchester government teams, in order to sort of make sure you wave the flag and talk to as many people as possible to try and make sure your application has the highest chance of success. Monocles, proposals and deadlines. Do have a look at what the Arts Council might be able to offer, and also opportunities via the big lottery fund. They may be relevant in some cases. So those would be our recommended next steps. That's all the stuff about Euclid. You don't need to read that anymore. You've seen that many times before. Thank you very much. Right, okay, I'm now going to go back to the chat button just to sort of double check to see whether or not anybody. Right, okay. Thank you, Velian, for the big lottery fund link. That's extremely useful. Looks like summer 2015 at the earliest. Yes, I'm not surprised. That seems to be the general deadline for any of these programs at this particular stage. So yes, that makes sense. Are there any other questions at this point? I mean, this is a matter of keeping track of things and developing that relationship and so on. But we will keep people updated as much as we possibly can about everything else. But if you are in contact with your LEP, then you should, you've done as much as you possibly can at this stage, and they should be providing you with more information. Yeah, that's it. Contact the LEP. Okay, well, thank you very much. If any other questions, then please don't hesitate to contact me. I hope that's been at least a useful introduction to clarify the way the whole system works. And there'll be more LEPs more webinars coming up in March. And if there's major developments in any of this, then we'll be looking into that and providing some more information in due course. So thanks very much for participating, and see you at the next LEP. Send me an email if there are any questions. Oh, right. Trevelyan, you're writing a Europe for Citizens bid. Oh, right. If you are, Trevelyan, that's great. I'd be really grateful if you could just send me a summary or of the bid you're putting in for Europe for Citizens, because we are trying to keep track of interesting projects that are being submitted. So if you wouldn't mind sending me just a paragraph at some point once it's gone in, that would be very useful, just to sort of see the sorts of projects that are being put in. I think you've probably got a good chance of being successful in that. I don't know what the project's about, but there is a shortage of successful UK applicants. So you know, good luck with that one. Okay, thanks very much, and farewell for now.